All right. Yeah. My name is Demola Sonyaolu. Backstage Story show on Backstage Story TV. That's what we are doing. And NSAS now. I've been able to speak with several political juggernauts. That's the way I call them. And I have another political juggernaut online right now. And Nigeria is in a moment of very sad mood. Uh, Young kids have been shot at with live ammunition. NSAS now seems to be trending and entering into another phase of unexpected scenario of negativity in Nigeria. I have with me Tope Fasua. Tope Fasua was also a presidential candidate of a political party in Nigeria. He is live with me now. We would have gone on live stream, but network seems to be very unstable at the moment, and that's why we have to do this. At least his voice needs to be heard by people of his generation, and because he was also part of those who wanted to take the helm of the affairs of this nation, we need to hear his voice to know what he would have done differently if he was in power. Talk, nice to have you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Now, what's NSAS now? Let's start from there. NSAS now. A lot of people have said this is a social revolution. This NSAS scenario and this event that is happening at this moment in the history of Nigeria, what is your take about
it? Well, it's difficult to even know what to make of it at this stage. Well, when they came first, I also got inkling that the youths were going to use it to reposition Nigeria, and I felt that okay, NSAS was a bit narrow, given that SARS problem is not the same in the north as it is in the south, and I was looking at what the youth could use to unite themselves, and something that would really drive, if you like, a positive revolution. But later on, I was told that, the youth had a strategy and the NSAS is just an entry point. And of course, the protest started and we were able to quite organize themselves. So we supported them. I was with them in National Assembly on one of those days. We supported them. We thought there was anger amongst the youth and so on. And of course, it went on. And at some point, I believe they really got the ears of government. Government was really afraid, probably still are afraid. And they are really ready to discuss with the group. Now, of course, that's where the issue of strategy comes in. The group is leaderless. And so there was nobody to stand forward, and nobody can act.
Before we go into the leadership or leaderless group, would the what we see now that has resulted to NSAS, that has resulted to agitation by the young folks, wouldn't you say you belong to the political class? That's the way I would classify you as. You're a politician. Apart from being a young person, you are still a politician because you contested. So if you do not have political experience, you won't come into that terrain. The young people feel that the politicians have taken them for granted for too long. Is that what you make from this or not?
Well, first of all, in 2016 into 17, I also felt the way this youth feel, and I looked at the options available, and I felt that it would be good to invest some of my resources and bring people together and form a political party. And I also thought I had the good ideas, and somewhere in 2017-18, I also proposed to run for president. However, I see a scenario where this idea of one is a politician is being hung on one's neck like a lodestone, and it's something I need to push off and forget about that. Because again, even when we were cheated and our license for our party was taken, we got no support from anywhere, and we won at that time. So I think the dichotomy of they are politicians, we are clean, is a bit of a downside to the campaign of the youth right now. indeed, yes, they need some experience on how to go about it. I personally think that the political option may be better and more sustainable, given the fact that we are in a democracy. Um, we spent several decades fighting for this democracy, and we're talking of people like Fela before he died, Fela Kuti, all the Falan of this world, very important people, Chima Ubani, all of those people fought and died for corruption. I mean, for what we have now, to push off corruption and to bring in democracy and to chase away the army. And so the labors of those people cannot be discounted as being nothing, So I think that a broad-based coalition is what the youth should be looking at finding at this point in time. They should try not to alienate people. Of course, they may be suspicious that people want to hijack their thing. Yeah. But you see, if the idea they're coming with is very, very grounded, if you like, nobody can take it away from them. Yeah. For example, if you are digitizing some of your ideas and it is digital in approach and all of that, no old person can ever replicate what you have. They can only try. However, there are some things that you also need from the old people or the slightly old people. And you certainly cannot run the country alone. You have to know that even if you get the opportunity to run the country, you're still going to have to govern over everybody, old, young, big, small, educated, illiterate, and whatever, all the that spectrum. So, ordinarily, I don't call myself a politician. I don't look like one. I don't act like one. I don't think like one. I'm a nation builder. I'm more even of a fiery revolutionary. My campaign slogan was revolution of ideas. I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in violent revolution. I believe that one can topple government with the sheer force of, groundbreaking ideas. I know it's tough and it sounds a bit utopian, but I think that's what is sustainable. Having fought for this democracy over decades is not what we should just throw away all of a sudden again. And ordinarily, I've not even seen the model where a democratic government will be overthrown and except the army takes over. I've not seen what else can take over. Or rather, I don't know, I could be educated to say it's possible to remove a government that into its term. I'm not talking about removing a president. Okay. So you can remove a government that is into its term and replace it with another government democratically. It's going to cause a lot of problem, and I think we need to consider that. And I'm sure that most Nigerians don't want to live under military jackboot again. But if you want to, even if Buhari was removed, then the next natural succession is Oshibajo. If Oshibajo doesn't take it, then the Senate president, then Gbadagba Miller out of reps, and on like that. There's a hierarchy about how these things are done, and I think that should be considered. Even if we will talk about constitutional review, it has to be done under a certain protocol, and I think we can't throw away the baby and the bathwater.
Okay, talking about leadership of the NSAS protester, like some young folks that have engaged, what I heard, what they told me directly was that they enjoy the way the protest is leaderless. Reason being that the government will end their protest faster if there's a leader to capture.
Yes.
Meaning catch the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. So right now they are not going through that route anymore because from antecedent, I think this guy sat down to study the trend of how the government operates and decided not to have a leader. So there's nobody the government can actually pinpoint and say, oh, this is the person championing this cause, and that is the reason why this has been a bit effective. Now, looting and all this thuggery, would you not agree that these looters and thugs, as they are labeled, are created at the creation of a government or an administration or past misgovernance? What do you have to say about it?
I do not know if the government has the ability to unleash criminals into society and mobilize thugs and arsonists and looters and burglars and robbers.
What I mean in that aspect is that as a result of the corruption in the system and not taking care of the youth cadre in the society, this this generation of those classes of thugs and rogues were created because of the system's negligence of that of the youth.
Well, it's a bit tough hearing what you're saying, but let me try and attempt an answer. So basically, I don't know what's going on. I cannot make a judgment call on who is responsible for this hooligan thing that's going on. Certainly, if the hooligans are not the same as the peaceful protesters, that's for sure. But every strategy has its own advantage and disadvantage. The leaderlessness of a campaign such as this means that it can go viral very quickly. Okay, it can go viral quickly, and it may be difficult to stop easily. However, the downside is that anybody can layer any of their own agenda on what you're doing and misconstrue your purpose. For example, between Lekki, where seems to be the epicenter of the campaign, and Aja, there are different kind of people living there. Or between Ikeja, Alausa, and Alagbado or Okokomaiko, there are a different kind of people living in those places and a different thinking behind the way they see life. So if they get unruly when you're not supposed to get unruly, they may still do that unruliness in the name of the movement, given that there's no leader. Okay, so that's one. You can see people doing all sorts of things. You may also find it difficult to build consensus as to what do we want to achieve. For example, if you look at the list of 14 things that the youth proposed to achieve, because it moved from 5 to 7 to 9, then to 14, and then to 23. If you look at the list of 14 and the 23, the 14 was a kind of a socialist agenda. They were asking for cheaper fuel, cheaper electricity, and all that. But the list of 23 seems to have been crafted by a capitalist kind of banker who was saying, look, deregulate everything, privatize everything, give us the opportunity to make money. So you find it difficult to articulate an idea and to build consensus and to actually agree on anything. That's the problem with a leaderless organization. And of course, there's a book called The Leaderless Revolution. However, the downside is that the leaderless revolution may work better in an environment maybe like all those places in Europe where people actually have enough food to eat, there's a good social security system. But when people have basic needs and, you say, well, there's no leader, express yourself, and you're looking for heroes in unlikely places, chances are that, there may be a derailment of the idea. Now, the advantage of having a leader is that you get direction, and the leader can actually say, this is where we're going, everybody follows. Or a few leaders, okay, depending on how it is. But of course, the disadvantage is that that leader can be targeted and taken out, can be also approached and bribed and misled and, easily used to diffuse. So my thinking then is, given that there'll always be advantage and disadvantage, I felt that it would be good for this movement to pause from time to time and assess their strengths and also make some moves in terms of, listen, let's put a few things in the bag and then come back. Of course, the government was already afraid of them and their achievements, and the government was ready to speak to them. But I felt that it did not take that advantage when it presented itself, and I felt that there were a few other things that were being layered, which was outside the control of the movement. There were a few other agendas that were being layered. Nigeria is a deeply divided country with all sorts of animosities as a result of past injustices. So one has to be extremely careful not to make yourself into a tool to be used by someone to, for their own ends, which may not align with yours. That's what I think of that.
All right. I'm going to ask you this very unusual question. Why I'm asking you is because you competed for that seat, for the number one seat. What would you, as president, have done differently in this situation?
Almost everything. Just when they ask me, what would I have done as president in general if I get to Nigeria, I tell people everything. And then in this instance, to everything. I'm a very communicative person. So, I mean, here now we're looking for our president to even tell us what's what. Even to read a speech that may have been crafted backhand by some smart special assistant or whoever. We can't find the man. Why is he taciturn? Why is he always in taciturn? Why has he always refused to speak with Nigerians, especially at a time like this when assuaging the feelings of the people is absolutely critical. So in terms of communication, I would have done it differently. In terms of governance day by day, I would have done it differently. You know, Buhari came and the middle-aged people, all the 50, 60 people, who many of them had been state governors or senators and so on, they elbowed everybody out and inserted themselves, installed themselves as ministers and all of that. And Buhari is not a perceptive individual, unfortunately. But I just think that we still need to protect this democracy. And of course, he didn't appoint any of the youth into offices. He didn't give them responsibility. They are running the government with a bunch of old, wasted, and tired people when he should have actually taxed the youth and say, okay, all of this noise you are making, come on, go and take this appointment, do this, do that. Let us see the magic you are saying you can perform. Is it not unfortunate? So everything would have been done differently. I mean, even when, if you have a sit down like that, and it was a very tricky situation, the sit down that they had in Lekki and other places. I mean, we find out that our police, our anti-riot police cannot even control, such a crowd without having to start firing ammunition into them. And surprisingly, they brought the army. And we saw that, in fact, my fear was that all of those bullets we were hearing, that staccato, whatever, was shooting directly at the crowd. I mean, it would have been worse than Tiananmen Square or anything that had happened in history. But I think maybe they mostly shot up. However, I'm sure that a few people would have died as well because a few bullets would have missed being shot into the air and all of that stuff. So it's a very unfortunate scenario. If I was the leader, of course, the investment, of the people's resources would have been differently done, such that we should be able to take care of this kind of thing. I would be on the street, all right? If I was a leader, I probably would be mingling with the boys and say, guys, what can we do for you? And then, of course, if I was a leader, if I see that it's impossible for me to run the country and it's too much of a border and a burden, I'll quit because I'd never stay where I'm not needed and where I'm not wanted and where I'm not effective. I don't stay in such places. I put up, I shared something on my page a couple of days back about Japan. And before Shinzo Abe came, Shinzo stayed for about 7 years, but he left, a couple of weeks back. I said, listen, I'm tired. I have to go and take care of myself. Before Shinzo came in, most of the PMs that they were finding would start for 1 year and leave, some of them for 200 days, and they just leave. They just walk away. And it was a bit difficult for them to keep leaders. Nigeria should be such a country where we find it hard to keep leaders because there's a lot of problems in this country, both the ones that we have self-foisted on ourselves, our past injustices against each other, our history, our not to talk of economic problems, the social problems we have. There are, enormous problems that, most of the people we see running for government are people who are thinking about the photo opportunity. They're looking at these big men. They want to ride private jets, They want to answer president. They don't know what the work entails. The work of being a Nigerian president is a death wish. And I tell people that, especially when I run, I told them, by the time you even begin to look at international stakes, high stakes politics, and begin to look at, vested interests, even locally and internationally, you'll be shocked the kind of requests that we made of you because you are the president of Nigeria. Some things are impossible, but they would ask you to do it. So it's a very tough scenario, but I think that I would have acted much differently. I wouldn't even have this kind of problem on my hands.
Right.
However, I must also say that sometimes, no matter how you try, sometimes you also find that some people don't like your guts. Sometimes when you do right, they want you out all the same, and they can give you a lot of problems. It will depend on how clean your heart is and how clean your spirit is to be able to get loyalists who will stand by you at such moments.
All right. I have two very quick questions for you before we round off because I know your schedule is quite tight. Cost of governance in Nigeria. Part of the demands of these NSAS is that the cost of governance is just way, way, way too expensive. The National Assembly folks are receiving quite a humongous amount of money at the expense of the impoverished masses. Cost of governance. That's number one. Then restructuring. What does restructuring mean to you, and what do you think restructuring should be, or do you think restructuring is just an overflow cliche that people should forget about? Cost of governance, restructuring. What are your opinions?
Okay, let me try. Let me start with restructuring first. You see, I think what's meant by restructuring. I think when people agitate about restructuring, they are actually agitating about status. They are actually complaining about things just being the same for a long time. A country should be run by leaders who look from time to time into the structure, quote and unquote,
Okay.
or it has to be called a structure or a sort of code book,
Yeah.
okay, with which they run the country, and look very deeply and say, and ask only one question: is this working for the people, or is it working? Is this the best we can do for the people? At every point in time, if they do that, they will find out that there's something they can tweak. When they tweak such a thing, it is a restructuring, in my view. So, and I always say that, it is only since 1999 to date that this country actually totally stopped restructuring. Before we were structuring, even in the military days, okay? The military days, they will create states from time to time, they will create new local governments. You remember that the last time we talked about local government in this country was when Tinubu created some 37 or so local governments in Lagos, or was it 27? And Obasanjo decided to withhold the allocation from Lagos State until Yar'Adua came and gave them. And Lagos was being run solely on what they could derive internally. Why did that restructuring attempt in Lagos State become an outlawed thing? Why was it unlawful? Why was it criminalized? Okay. If you look at the military days, they will tweak states and all of that. Even when they appoint leaders in states, like state governors, sometimes they will send son of the soil, and sometimes they will look at it again and say, no, if the son of the soil gets too close to these people, let's send a complete stranger. So in those states, we had guys like Michael Akibe, who was from Edo State. We had Otiko, who was an Ondo guy. Then we had some guy called Musa, Labiu Musa, something or the other. God knows from where. And so now we had Onyaru Bulem, and so he was an Igbo guy. So that actually kept people engaged and actually made people feel that the government was thinking for them. And also they tweaked around even things like the allocation formula. So it was coming from somewhere before we get to this 52% for federal, 26 for state, 22 for local government, the remaining 2% for some of these things that federal government does and so on. Well, and it has been that way since around 2003 or thereabouts, when Obasanjo last touched it. And he just made a small adjustment from where it was in 1999 when he came. Since that time, nothing has changed. So you find out that the politicians have only just dug in, made themselves comfortable, and they're not thinking about this system we are running. Is it working for the people? If it was working, can it work better for the people? So that's my take on restructuring, even though restructuring is often overwhelmed by the thought that it should be about whether we're one as a country, whether some part of Nigeria is dragging the rest back, whether we should go back to regionalism. I think that that discussion, especially the regionalism one, is not one I'm very, very keen on, because they're saying we should go back to 1953 when the regions were created and so on. But that is an archaic thought, if you ask me. I think it's a bit analog. It's just like the same Buhari is looking for a document of 1956 on cattle grazing. he said he asked one of his ministers to go and look for that document. So you are looking for 1950s solution in a time when the world has gone digital, right? You should be thinking digitally. We should be thinking, and I think that most of our youth, I was going to challenge them, Generation Z, those born 1995 to date. We should be talking of geospatial solutions to this problem that we have. I will really sat down to think about it and brainstorm about it. That's what I think we should be thinking about. So that's restructuring. I think people are asking for some movement. And I think that restructuring should be written into the Constitution of Nigeria to say every 3 years, we will sit down and look at this Constitution and see whether it works for us. For example, things like unicameral versus bicameral system. Things like people say we should go back to parliamentary. There's a reason why we left parliamentary for presidential, because it was believed that the parliamentary government was the reason why the First Republic failed. That people did not respect Tafawa Balewa enough. He was just, after all, another member of parliament from some place in Bauchi State, and who was he to command anything at the center? I remember the story being told of when they wanted to have some steel mill in the early 60s in Nigeria, and he wanted to create some steel mill in some place that had the resources to make it survive. And of course, the other premiers, they took him on and said, my friend, if you run this federal government, if you don't put a steel mill in each of our areas, then forget it. And the man said, what about the fact that you may not have the resources there? They said, no way. And they stalled it. And he told Patrick Okigbo, Pius Okigbo, that, look, you know what, we'll do nothing. And that was when Nigeria started to have problems, okay? They did nothing about those students. So, and that's why we moved to presidential system to say, let's have a president that everybody will vote for. But you see, there are also hybrids. In Ghana, they have a president. He's not a member of parliament. They have a president and then they have a parliament. The same in South Africa. They have a president, or even though he's a member of parliament, but they have a president who is voted for as a president. And in other countries in Europe, you can see that as well. We could copy from those. See, either we copy, but even it's best that we think for ourselves what fits us. However, the process of reaching consensus is a very dangerous process. When people will tell you they're not aware of what you wanted to do before you change the system on them and all those kind of things. Then, of course, cost of governance. Certainly, the structure drives the cost of governance. The cost of governance certainly is too high. But let me say this way. Nigeria is actually an underperforming country. A country of small dreams. Okay? Nigeria is a country where, I've always taken apart our small budget. The budget for 2021 is barely $164 when I divided it per person. I divided at 380. It is $164 per human being for everything you need for a given year is what the federal government is budgeting, whether for your security, education, water, electricity, whatever, in everything you need, which is one of the lowest in the world. The other time I did analysis, it was actually the lowest in the world, even lower than a place like DR Congo, where they have failed territories and so on. So now if you look at it, you may say the problem may not even be the cost of governance, but the fact that you have a small budget and an unimaginative budget year on year. But of course, the fact also is that the little that is provided is actually usurped by people in government fully. Okay, so we're saying that a country that's settling on the brink of destruction and bankruptcy, but these big men will not joke with their big cars. They will not joke with their appetances of office. They will not joke with their frequent travels and luxury travels and so on. So it's just a waste of time. It's as if the little that is in government is reserved for them to just generally have a good time and run. And again, there's also this thing about parastatals and ministries and all of that, the proliferation of them. The Rosary report, they were complaining that time of 522 or thereabouts parastatals under a Rosary report of 2011. As we speak, number of MBAs is approaching 1,000, if not more. because for every bill that is passed by the National Assembly, a new MBA is created. All right, and then we see all sorts of proliferation and people doing same functions, overlapping functions, people generally moving around and shuffling papers, and achieving next to nothing for the country. So it's a big tragedy in that light. Yes, the cost of governance is high, but more importantly, the imagination that goes behind our budgeting system, the need for us to calibrate our budget for the people, the things that matter to them, even go to the basics. You talk about agriculture, shelter, textile, water, electricity, security. Those are the things. That's where we should have a lot of budget going there to incentivize those places. If it's areas where the government cannot play directly, for example, in textile. But until this country learns to actually stand on its own and produce what it needs, and we produce what we need ourselves, we're not going anywhere. So that's the way I look at it.
All right. Thank you so much, Tope Fasua. It's been awesome having you and for creating time to join. We spent over 30 minutes on this show. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's so much we want to talk about, but the time is fast spent. Until I meet you guys again on the next exciting episode of Backstage Story Show. Tope Fasua, thank you so much.